We're going to get into the Easter story. Surprise, surprise. But first, there's something a pattern that I'm seeing in this story that we're going to talk a little bit about. But honestly, I think it's a pattern that we see in our own lives sometime. We see it in serious ways. We also see it in all kinds of ways. Have you ever noticed a situation where you had a certain particular experience, and based on that experience, you made some certain assumptions that maybe later came out to be false? Okay? You had an experience, you made some assumptions, and then based on those assumptions, it led you down a path or led you in a direction that wasn't actually probably the best. Okay, let me give you an example. So this isn't actually an example of me doing that, but rather me maybe influencing somebody else to do that. So I've got a good friend. His name is Bo. Some of you guys might know him as Dr. Bo, but we've been friends for a really long time. And in fact, this story goes back, I want to say roughly 20-ish years. I think it's maybe longer. Man, we're old. But early on, when we were young men, I was living in Beth and I. We were married. We were living in southern Missouri, and one of the things that we like to do, we love adventuring and kind of hiking and that kind of stuff. And we would love to go spelunking. Does anybody know what spelunking is? Oh, there's a handful, right? Basically, it's just exploring caves. There's a particular place, and we'd go and just this piece of property. It wasn't like driving a car through kind of thing. This is like put on your dirty clothes and a headlamp and let's go, right? So we're exploring this cave, and Bo and Jen came and visit, but me and Bo and another buddy of ours, RJ, he planted a church in Iowa. Some of you guys might know him a number of years ago. But the three of us, we're going to go spelunking. Now, I've done this a lot. I've done it a number of times. Maybe RJ had gone with me once, but Bo had never been before, okay? And so we're like ready for an adventure. And we go in, and it starts out, there's like the mouth of the cave, and it's maybe like 10 feet wide and 10 feet high, and it just like slowly narrows as you walk back, and you go back in about 100 yards, and then you get to this spot where it kind of sort of looks like a dead end, but it actually continues, but you have to, there's like a little shelf, and there's like an opening that's maybe like 18, 24 inches high or something, and maybe only 6 feet wide, and you have to like, just one of these guys, right? You just wiggle your way through it. Well, so, okay, we've already been in, we're talking, we're having fun, we're laughing, we're having a good time. Well, what happens in caves is your voice begins to wake the bats up, right? Because they sleep during the daytime. And so we're now waking the bats up. Now we're like shimmying through this tight little gap in order to get to the hallway on the other side. And then, this would always happen. Every time we'd go, this would always happen. And all of a sudden you'd hear and a bat would just like go zipping by your face. And you're all vulnerable out there, whatever. And I know this is startling. I remember Bo like, what was that, right? Like, he's tough. He's tough, but like, it's startling, okay? And what was that? Oh, it's bats. Like, and it's a little bit unnerving. It's a little bit eerie. I'm not gonna lie, okay? And I'm like, but they're like, are they gonna hurt you? I'm like, don't worry, these ones don't bite. Here's the deal. Don't judge me, okay? Like I was trying to just calm in my defense, they've never bit me, okay? I've done this a bunch of times. I've never been bit by one of these bats. And but I'll be honest, I did not do like research on bats in southern Missouri, and I don't really know. I just know that I've never been bit before, okay? So I tell Bo, I'm like, hey, no, don't worry, they don't bite. Just keep on going, So we just keep on going, and everyone's all, right? So we get out on the other side, and now it's so cool. Now it's like 6 feet wide and maybe like 12, 15 feet high, water up to your knees, and just three dudes with flashlights walking. It's so fun, so tough. And we're walking along. And the longer we go, the more we wake up the bats, the more they start, but now they're like way up above our head, no big deal. And then we go, and then this had happened a number of times before this. We get to this certain spot, and there's like one more bend, and then I know that it opens up to this cavern that's like maybe like 30 feet wide, round, okay, and it's tall ceilings and stalagmites and stalactites, and like it's so cool. We're about to get to the spot, except, and this happened a few times before, we're not all that far in. We've only been probably going for like 30 minutes or so, and like the squeaking of the bats, like it's similar to the squeaking of a mouse, right? Like, how many mice do you think it would take before that sound got loud? That's how many bats were in this cavern, right? And so we're like, that's where I get like, again, I don't really know. Okay, so that's where I'm like, I don't, like, this is, I don't know how many bats live in a cavern, but that day it was all of them. They all lived there. And so we're going and like, this is where we typically turn around when we hear this because they're all loud. And Bo says, well, they don't bite, right? Now, this is the time I probably should have come clean. But I'm like, I got caught. Yeah. And now you got the macho-ness. There's 3 dudes. 2 of them think that bats don't bite. Like, come on, let's keep going. I'm like, all right. So anyway, we keep on going there. I'm not gonna go to the whole story. It gets wild. There becomes way more bats. They start running into us. It gets freaky. One guy ends up losing a shoe. It was a whole story, okay? But I'm not gonna give you all of it. I will say this. Here's what happened. Bo had an experience with me. See, in his experience pointed to the fact that I'm a trustworthy man. I'm a good guy that doesn't lie to people for no reason. Right? Based on his experience, he could trust the things that I told him. That was his experience. So therefore, he made an assumption. He made an assumption that the bats don't bite. And in his mind, it wasn't it wasn't a big jump. In fact, he wouldn't have even said it was an assumption. He would have said it's a truth. This is not my assumption. This is the truth. Because based on my experiences, my close friends don't lie to me. So therefore, if he said they don't bite, then I'm assuming that they don't bite. And what happened next, because he had assumptions based on an experience, he made some decisions that his liar, gullible friend just followed because he was afraid of owning his lie, right? So which ended up him in a dark and scary hole in the ground being pelted by bats. Okay? Bad decision. Fun. I'm glad he made that bad decision. It was really fun. But altogether, bad decision. You see, it happens it happened in the cave, but honestly, we do that in our lives all the time, right? We experience the world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We experience all that life has in front of us. And we all face these different experiences. Many of us, they have overlapping themes, but we experience life in a certain way. And as we experience life, we begin to make certain assumptions. Now, honestly, the majority of us make these assumptions believing that they're truths, but they're really just assumptions based on our experiences. And what happens is the decisions that we make based on those assumptions are going to lead us where we ought to be or where we ought not to be. So what's really important is understanding the truth. So that the assumptions that we make are based on truth and not just a part of the truth. You see, well, let's get right into it, okay? I'm about ready to preach my sermon before we even got there. Let's get into it. You see, we're gonna read the Easter story today, and we're gonna reflect on the Easter story today. And as we do, we're gonna find in this story this exact pattern took place. There were some experiences that the followers of Jesus had, and some assumptions they made based on those experiences, and it led them to the places they went. And so I want us to just kind of explore this story. And I believe whether this is the first time you've ever stepped foot into the doors of the church or whether you basically live here, and everybody in between, I believe that we can all find ourselves somewhere in the story. So let's get into it. You guys ready? All right, Mark chapter 15. In fact, I'm going to begin this story where, for those of you who are with us on at our Good Friday service, I'm going to begin the story where our Good Friday service left off. Mark chapter 15, verse 39. It says, "And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, 'Surely this man was the Son of God. Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Just put a pin in that little thought. They had followed him and cared for his needs. So, jump down to verse 48. So Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, he bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. Friends, this is the moment in the story. This is the moment that hope dies. You see, Jesus, the living Jesus, meant hope. For everyone in this story, the living Jesus meant that there was hope, that things could change, hope that the oppression would stop, hope that my life could be different. And honestly, I believe as I read this story, I truly believe that they held on to that hope through a lot of this process. I believe that they held on to hope when they saw Jesus arrested. They were confused, but they held on to hope. They held on to hope when they saw him mocked. They held on to hope when they saw him beaten. But now that he's been executed and buried, it's pretty clear. There's nothing that Jesus can do for me now, right? As they look on, what could I possibly assume that Jesus could do at this point? You know, it's at this point in the story that all the previous assumptions that have been made about Jesus, him restoring Israel and overcoming evil, restoring peace and ruling in power, like all of these assumptions, all of these previous assumptions, they died with Jesus. And to those who were there with him, it just became so obvious. He is now powerless. See, all those previous assumptions, that's what we would have called faith, right? It's at this point in the story that not only Jesus died, but faith died with him, right? And honestly, if we'd be really, really honest with ourselves, like for some today, that's not just these women's story, maybe that's your story too. Right? Once upon a time, you held out hope, you held out faith that Jesus was going to change your life, that he would overcome evil, that he would restore peace and move in power for you. But somewhere along the way, something happened. Or maybe it was a series of somethings. And from your perspective, Jesus was exposed as the fraud that he is. Can I tell you, you're not the first to feel that way. You're not the first to think that. In fact, that's the origin of this story. That's how everyone felt when they watched Jesus die. Some felt duped. Others betrayed or lied to. They felt stupid and embarrassed and gullible and victimized and it's at this point, it's because of all of their past experiences. What past experiences am I talking about? Because they watched him die. These past experiences aren't like way back in the past. It's like, no. But I was there. I saw him breathe his last. Here's some other past experiences that would reinforce that. And typically, when people die, they stay dead. That's my past experience, right? I mean, he did just raise Lazarus. So, large majority of people, right? When they die, they stay dead. Are experiences that reinforce this other experience. Jesus died. I saw it. It was right there. I saw him die. Dead people they just stay dead. And because of my past experience, they were all operating out of the same assumption. They all came to the same conclusion. Jesus is dead and he can't do anything for me. But the story continues. So that's what we pick up in Mark chapter 16. Starting verse 1, right? It's really just the next verse that we come to. It says this: when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought some spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. And they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? Okay, I want you to notice something here. Even though they were operating from the assumption that Jesus can't do anything for me, this is interesting. They still went looking for Jesus, right? They came to the conclusion, like based on their experience, I saw him die. Based on my past experiences, dead people don't come back to life. Based on my experience, I saw him die. I'm going to make some assumptions. He's still dead. And yet, even though he was lifeless, they continued to look for Jesus. And so today, what I want us to see, what I want us to explore together is the woman and the women's search for Jesus, okay? I want to look at where they went wrong, what they did right, and how this journey changed their lives, and how this journey changed the world, really. So based on their experience, they did the only thing they knew how to do, right? Like, what would you do in that situation? Grieve. I mean, they were experiencing the greatest level of grief that probably of their life. And so we're gonna follow this pattern that we established at the beginning, and we'll follow it through into the story. So what we've been saying from the beginning, their experience led them to an assumption. Now I'm gonna say this, their past experience led them to a false assumption, right? Their experience, watching Jesus die, shaped their assumption, Jesus can't do anything for me now. But watch what happens. Here's where I want us to lean in a little bit. Watch what happens to what they do next. Based on those two things. Those things are in place. That seems pretty clear. Their false assumption leads them to look for Jesus for the wrong reason and in the wrong place, asking the wrong question. So that's what I want to look at today. Like, what did this process look like in a little bit more detail? First, I want to see this. Their false assumption led them to look for Jesus for the wrong reason, okay? Let's slow down. I'm going to throw some text up on the screen here for you as we just slow down and take a closer look. Verse 1, Mark 16:1 says this: when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices, note this, so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. They went looking for Jesus to anoint his dead body. Now, here's what you have to understand in the story, just some logistics about it. This burial was a rush job, okay? So think about it. He dies, like he breathes his last at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sabbath, and they got the big Passover celebration going on. Sabbath begins, in the Jewish tradition, begins at sundown, okay? So there's only a few hours there in order to be able to bury Jesus' body. And there was some red tape that they had to cross. So here's the deal. They needed, because they just didn't want his body like all shamefully hanging there all weekend. So like we need to do something with this. So like they're like, okay, they had to go find a tomb. Jesus didn't have like a burial plot already picked out. This is kind of a surprise to everybody, right? So they had to go find a tomb, get permission from the Romans, remove Jesus from the cross, transport the body, seal it all up. Like they had to do all these things. And so they didn't go through all of the proper channels. So they skipped the proper processes for preparing a body for burial. Because the sunset was coming and Sabbath was happening and they had to get it done. So now here, it's interesting and it makes plenty of sense. As soon as the sun was beginning to rise, which means as soon as they were able to begin looking for Jesus, as soon as that sun, up until then, it's Sabbath, we're resting. That sun begins to rise, they begin looking. But it's interesting, they were looking for a dead Jesus. They went to go make Jesus presentable. You remember what we read earlier, Mark 15:41. We said put a kind of pin in that. This is how they lived their life and ministry with Jesus alive. It says they followed him and cared for his needs. Here they are, even after his death, going to care for his needs. They're going to prepare him. They're going to make him presentable. But here's where they went wrong. Jesus said he was going to go rise from the dead. He said it, and he said it plainly. And yet, there they were, looking among the dead for somebody who was alive. But let's not, like, we can't judge them. If you saw somebody die, you saw where they were buried, where would you go look for them, right? Like, they're obviously looking in the place that they last saw him. They're looking for what the Jesus that they knew, not the Jesus that he said he would be. They were looking to preserve his body. They were looking to make him presentable. They were looking for Jesus for the wrong reasons, right? They came to the conclusion, they came to the assumptions that he was powerless. There was nothing that Jesus could do for them. And so what do they say? We'll go to Jesus, take care of him. We're going to make him presentable. We're going to take care. Listen, can I just tell you, Jesus doesn't need us to take care of him. We'll go to Jesus because we feel sorry for him. Nobody should have just been chucked into a tomb like that. We need to go. So they had these past experiences that informed their current assumptions that pointed them into searching for Jesus in the wrong reasons. But not just the wrong reasons, they're looking in the wrong place, right? Mark 16:2, very early on the first day of the week, Jesus, after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. They're going to the tomb. They went to the place of the dead to find the living. Why wouldn't they look for the living? Why would they look there? The same reason you and I would look there. The assumptions they made about Jesus, based on the experiences they had, the experiences that were real. Listen, they weren't false experiences. They weren't making up past experiences. They were real experiences of hurt and loss that informed an assumption that ultimately wasn't true. The assumption that they were living from gave direction to their next decisions. And so they began looking for Jesus because they didn't know what else to do. They began looking for Jesus because it's what they've always done, or at least for the last few years. They were looking for Jesus because this is what you do, because we didn't know what else to do. And yet, they're looking for Jesus for all the wrong reasons. And they showed up looking for Jesus in all the wrong places. And then, on top of that, they were asking the wrong question. Look at the next verse, Mark 16:3. They asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? Right? It seems like a logical question. Again, you're not going to fault anybody. That seems like the right question, but it really wasn't the right question. However, of all the wrongs they made, this is the closest one, right? The wrong question is who's going to remove the stone? Because what they didn't know is the stone was already moved. They were asking the question, who's going to remove the obstacle? There's something between us and Jesus, and it needs to be moved if we're going to get to Jesus. Who's going to remove the obstacle? But the problem is, what they didn't understand is that the obstacle had already been moved. Here's the question they should have been asking: how do we get access to Jesus? Sounds like the same, but has different implications, doesn't it? And so here we have these ladies whose assumptions were formed by their experiences, and now they're searching for Jesus, which is right, but they're searching for Jesus, but for the wrong reasons, in the wrong places, asking the wrong questions. But here's the encouraging part to me. They still found him. I mean, they still found him. Listen what the scripture says next. Mark, they did it all wrong, and they still found him. Mark 16:4-7 says this, but when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. And they entered the tomb, and they saw a young man dressed in white robes sitting on the right side. And they were alarmed. I would be too. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He is risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him, but go tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. I find it really interesting what the angel said to him there. He says, here's the Jesus you were looking for, the Nazarene. That was his human markings. That was his ancestry. That is what defined him as a man. You're looking for the Nazarene. You're looking for the man Jesus. The man Jesus who is crucified. In essence, the angel's like, I don't know where you're going to find him. But let me tell you about the Savior Jesus who is risen. So you're looking for the wrong Jesus. I mean, yes, one and the same Jesus, I get it. But you're looking for a Jesus who's known by his human attributes. You're looking for a Jesus who is dead and can't do anything for you. You're looking for a Jesus that has been stripped of all power. But let me tell you where you can find the one you're actually probably looking for. Let me tell you about the risen Jesus. He's alive, and what does it say? And he's waiting for you. I love that. Here Mary and the ladies, they're running off because they want to encounter Jesus, but they're going for the wrong reasons, to the wrong place, asking the wrong questions. Their heart is right, their search is right, but their assumptions made them look in all the wrong places. Meanwhile, Jesus has risen from the dead, and he's like waiting for him to get to him. But they didn't find him in those places. But they were about to meet him. The angel tells him, listen, he's waiting for you. You know what? So many of us have lived this out very similarly, haven't we? We've looked for Jesus. We've looked in the wrong places. We've looked for the wrong reasons. We've been asking the wrong questions. Man, I've known a lot of people who've gone that route because based on the experiences they've had, they've got certain assumptions about where I'm going to find him, about what it's supposed to look like, about how this thing is supposed to work, and yet they feels like they keep running into a wall. And maybe you're there, but let me tell you, there is a Jesus who's not just the man who died, but the God who lives, and he's waiting for you today. Listen to what it says in verse 8. It says, trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him and who were mourning and weeping. If you want to read more detailed account of that, you can find it in John chapter 20 if you want to really dig in. And you have the actual interaction of Jesus and Mary. And the reality, she didn't even see him when she ran into him. She didn't recognize it was him when she ran into him because her assumptions were blinding him from the real Jesus. And finally, Jesus like, no, it's me. Here's what I want us to really, I want you to understand something. There's a lot of us, let's just call it like it is. There's a lot of us, we've had some pretty hurtful experiences within the church, whatever that means. We love to say that. But in other words, like, I saw something broken and hurtful within the church. And it left me with some assumptions. Maybe like, I've seen some things that are broken and hurtful from people who are supposed to be like leaders in this Jesus thing. And it left me with some assumptions. I've experienced some things that only lead me to the assumption that there is no power in Jesus. Man, those assumptions have been made by countless people. And to be honest, it's not because your experiences are wrong. I don't want you to hear me say that. Your experiences are real. What you face, and you may have seen or experienced some things that you should not have ever. No one should ever have had to experience or see or go through. It's not to minimize any of that. It's just to say this: it's not the whole story. You see, what these women had just experienced was not false. Now, their assumptions were wrong based on the experiences they had and the assumptions that they made, and the direction was all the wrong direction. But it was because the assumptions they made weren't based on truth. They were based on how they perceived their experience. You see, here's how it went down for the women. Like, they were excited. They were a week before, they're crying out, Hosanna. Jesus is riding in. Palm branches are waving. Everybody's high-fiving. Come on, let's go. We're taking over Rome. Jesus is our king. The assumptions were, he's our ticket out of here. He is the one that reigns in power. And a week later, Jesus dies. And here's what we do. We see this new experience as, okay, no. Now I really see who Jesus is. I had hope, I had faith, I had expectation. But now I see the real Jesus. And my assumptions flow from there. The story is not unique to you, but it is a common human story. Friends, the problem isn't that the experience of hurt or loss or setback or wrongs done, it's not that those aren't real, it's just not the complete story. You see, when everybody else thought Jesus was done, that Jesus was powerless, the truth was Jesus, in all of his power and all of his glory, were simply waiting for those who are broken to come find him. You know, I've heard a lot of just theories and ideas and sermons and preach. Why was it that Jesus first appeared to Mary? You know why? One of the reasons I believe it was? Because the 12 were still hiding. You see, that's a common response. When we see something, when we experience something in the realm of faith or Jesus, something that doesn't compute, that counters all the original thoughts that we had about him, and we feel like, okay, now Jesus was just exposed, a natural tendency is to shrink back and to hide. That's what the 12 did. That's what all the rest of the disciples did. Peter gets a bad rap for denying Jesus. The truth is, Jesus said, you're all going to deny me. Peter's just the one that we got the one-on-one account of. They were all hiding, but the women showed up. They didn't show up in faith to see a risen Jesus. They didn't show up right, looking for all the right reasons, because I'm sure he's still alive. They didn't show up looking in all the right places. He says he's going to be alive, so where's his favorite places to hang out? Let's go see if we can find. No, they came and did for the wrong reasons, looked, asked the wrong questions, searched in the wrong places, and yet there's something about the heart of Jesus that desires to reveal himself to show up for those who are looking for him. Man, that encourages me. You see, we do this. We do this so much. Why do we search for Jesus? Man, there's so many of us that our past experiences have given us a certain set of assumptions that inform our direction, inform our choices. And there's some of us who are still hiding. There's others. Listen, there are people who sit in churches every single week. There are people who, every time the doors are open, are in a church. And yet, they're still looking for a dead, lifeless Jesus. This isn't just for the one who's completely rejected and turned to their back. This is for each and every one of us to challenge and ask ourselves the question, what Jesus are you looking for? Maybe your past experiences are, Jesus is this thing that we talk about when we do our religious activities. But I've never seen him change anything. That's an incomplete story. Why do we come to Jesus? Some of us come to Jesus for nostalgia. I remember, this is a common, I'll just tell you, it's a common pattern, right? You grew up in church. Then you kind of do your own thing, try to figure out life by yourself, kind of step away from it. Then you have kids, and you're like, I remember Sunday school. Our kids should get Sunday school. So we come to Jesus for nostalgia. Some of us, maybe we didn't even grow up in church, but it just feels like the right thing to do, right? I don't know. Why am I looking for Jesus? Church just feels like the right thing to do. Or for others, it is because I've always done it. It's just what we do. Kind of like the ladies, like they showed up and took care of Jesus because it's just what we do. For some of us in this camp, like I want to preserve his name. I know Jesus isn't really popular in culture today in society, so I'm gonna try to just polish him up to make him presentable. I just want to make sure somebody's got to show up for him, right? We can't just leave him all by himself. So poor little Jesus. Let me see if I can go support Jesus a little bit. Listen, Jesus doesn't need your supportive care. So that just tells on you that you're searching for a dead Jesus who can't do anything. My Jesus has power. He's not looking for my supportive care. He's looking for my surrender. See, the right reason to come to Jesus is not for nostalgia or the warm feels or any of that. It's the same reason we come to Jesus today is the same reason they came to Jesus before he died. It's the same reason they gathered around the name of Jesus after he rose from the dead. It's so that we could know him for who he is in his true and rightful power. See, are you looking for Jesus just to kind of be the add-on? Like, here's my life, and you know what? It'd be really good if I add a little bit of Jesus to it. God's not interested in being your add-on. God's interested in you seeking him with all that you have because he wants to be known, not the dead Jesus, but the living one. The reason that we come to Jesus is to know him, to find him as he truly is. You know, we look in the wrong places too. Some of us, we look in religion, church attendance, and reading the Bible, and praying my prayers, and whatever good works that you can come up, or whatever religious works, spiritual things that you can come up with. Others, we do look in the good works. I almost said good looks. You know, maybe you find Jesus there too, I don't know. But we're looking for Jesus in the good works, right? Which honestly, it really is looking for him in the good looks. If I can look good, if I can stay clean, if I can do the right thing, then maybe Jesus is hiding behind a clean life. And if I just do it right, he'll pop up and I'll find him. Some of us are looking for Jesus in church community. I show up and like I need a little bit of Jesus, but like maybe if I just go to church enough, then maybe like I'll find him. Again, listen, Jesus is not playing hide and seek with you. He's not hiding behind these different things. Like in our story, Jesus wasn't hiding behind the stone. Like if you just get a little bit closer, I'm gonna you got me. Like that's not how it works. Now don't get me wrong. Jesus can be experienced in the religious activities. In fact, I don't know, I've kind of made it a thing. Like I'm kind of into that, right? Like Jesus, you can experience Jesus in the religious activities, the religious practices. You can experience Jesus in your good works. You can experience Jesus in your church community, just like Mary experienced Jesus in a graveyard. But if you're looking for him there, thinking that is him, that he's gonna pop up, you're gonna miss him. Because religion without a living Jesus, if you're looking for a dead Jesus in religion, you're gonna find a dead Jesus. Because religion without a living God is just a list of rules and it's dead. Good works without a living God is just being nice, and at the end of the day, that's just dead. Church community without a living Jesus is just a social club, and at the end of the day, that's just dead. Jesus would love to be experienced in these things, but he is not these things. Where does Jesus show up? In the middle of your ordinary, normal routine of life. He shows up in humility. He shows up in surrender. You don't need to be in a physical location. He shows up when you open your heart to him. He shows up when you're willing and vulnerable enough to be real, not only with him, but to yourself. He shows up not in the specific locations, but he shows up in the places of our heart when we're willing to open it up to him. And again, the question, how do I remove the obstacles? Oh my goodness, is that not the question that our world, who's trying to find Jesus in religion, that is the question that is being asked. How do I remove the obstacles? Man, I've met many people who are like, man, I want to come to Jesus, but man, again, you don't know the things that I've done. Guess what? He does. Man, but like, you don't understand, like the things that have done to me, I am not worthy. None of us are. And yet he brings us into his family anyway. You see, here's the thing is like God has done everything. Jesus had done everything. He demonstrated his power over the grave so that the tomb could, or the stone could be moved. And yet why do we keep trying to put obstacles in front of our own way? He's already removed the obstacles. Let's stop putting them back. Friends, he's a God who desires to be known and seen and experienced. He's a God that desires relationship with you. Let's stop putting the obstacles there. He's already removed them. Your sin has already been removed. Your guilt has already been removed. Here's some more obstacles. I referenced this earlier. But what about those big names that I keep hearing, keep falling left and right? Those pastors, like, if they can't do it, man, it's a review. This is the whole thing is a scam. Let me ask you this. What in the world does that guy's failure have to do with your relationship with Jesus? If you're practicing a religion, then don't follow a religion where their leaders are doing that stuff. If that's what you're into, then you're right. Bail. You see, we faulty assumptions based on incomplete truth. The truth is, God's looking for you. He's looking for a relationship with you. So why are we looking at like particular denominational or church leadership people? Like, well, if they can't do it, they're just scam. Look at that. They stole money from people. Therefore, God's not real. Like, let's just surface our expectations. What does one have to do with the other? Jesus rose from the dead, regardless if that dumb dude across the country with that other place did some dumb thing. Let Jesus deal with him and you deal with Jesus. Don't put obstacles between you and Jesus. He died to remove the obstacle. Friends, we do this in so many different ways. Don't allow the obstacle. That one person, they said they were a follower of Jesus, but they hurt me so badly. I am sorry. I do not minimize the hurt. I do not minimize the pain. But that person is going to answer to Jesus someday, and so are you. So you deal with what you can control, and you let God deal with what you can't. Don't put an obstacle in front of your way. The obstacle's already been removed. The question is, how do I get access? I want you to hear from a variety of scripture now. The heart of God. This is not just me drawing crazy conclusions to one story. This is the heart of God throughout scripture. Listen, Isaiah, Old Testament, Isaiah 29, 13 through 14. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. You're not looking for a dead religious Jesus, but when you open your heart to God and you truly seek him, listen, these women, their heart were in the right place. They had just had misinformed assumptions. Some of us are in that same place. Man, I thought I knew based on my experience. I assumed there'd be Jesus is found in X, Y, and Z. But listen, would you be brave enough and vulnerable enough to be real with your own heart and be like, God, I'm going to set aside my preconceived notions based on my past experiences. The word of God says that if you seek me with all your heart, he says, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. James 4:8, come near to God and he will come near to you. Hebrews 10:22, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings. And I love what it says here in Acts chapter 17. This is so good, guys. Paul is speaking. He's not speaking to Israelites, not speaking to Israel. He's speaking to a culture that actually worships all kinds of gods. They don't know the God of Israel. They don't know the one true God. They for sure don't know even about Jesus at all. And so here's what he says to them. He's introducing them, the God of the universe, to a group of people who have just this wide array of gods. This is what he says. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his need, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. From one man, he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall and determine their boundaries. In other words, God designed our universe and spoke purpose into it. And then it says his purpose was, okay, this is why. This is why God created the universe. This is why God made all that. This is why you and I existed. His purpose was for the nations. When he said nations, don't just think countries. What he's saying is this: for every individual, regardless of your background, your birthplace, your country of origin, your skin color, regardless of any of that, his purpose was that each and every one of us, so that you and I, his purpose was for the nations to seek after God. This is what he wants, to seek after God, and perhaps to feel their way towards him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. I love this picture. So many of us approach religion, religious things, God, Jesus, the whole concept, faith, as this like recipe to figure out. This formula that I got to get down. This community that I got to figure out the culture of, and so I can blend in. It's none of that. Paul, he's speaking, he says, listen, no, this is what it's like. This is what it's like. He's like, the God of the universe desires to be found, and he knows that you don't know where to start, and he knows that you're fumbling around in the dark. And he says, so it's kind of like this. It's kind of like we just always looking for somebody just to take a step in his direction and just kind of feel, even though I know it feels dark and you can't really tell where you're going, and I know we got all these bad experiences and they've shaped our assumptions and it's leading us in weird directions, but like, would you just reach for him? Would you just maybe feel your way towards him so that you can find him? And then it says, but he's not far away. This feel your way towards him is not this like, am I ever gonna make it, lost in a jungle picture. This is, he's standing right in front of you and he says, would you just reach out? You see, there is a risen Jesus that has power to change your life. But too many of us have settled for a dead Jesus that just gives you warm feels when you go to church. Friends, one will inform every aspect of your life. The other one is just going to waste your time. So what Jesus are you looking for today? God, we thank you.